All right, folks, we are back with the Pursuit of Ownership, and we are back again with Batman. This is part two. This is pretty much starting off as a case study of something that is very fascinating to George. We'll see what kind of legs this has. What we're looking at is a practice that has 4 ops, no room to grow, no other ops, but they got allegedly three full-time hygienists, and they were doing how much production was it?
1.2, he said 1.2, 1.3, and he said 40+% hygiene. So
yes.
this is right. Hold on. If Batman, you keep finding the practice. Tyler and I are going to talk for a bit. Send it to me,
Right.
okay? And
All right,
so first of all, we got to comment on this guy's name, Batman. So
Yes.
we were talking about this. We were laughing really hard about it before we started recording in part 1, and then we get on, and nobody laughs about Batman. We're just like, this is Batman. We're just gonna keep going, and nobody's gonna acknowledge the fact that we're calling this guy Batman for the whole episode. And he's like, I could go with Batman or Bob, and we're like, okay. And they're like, we're about to hit record and call this guy Bob. I'm like, no, we're doing Batman. And so this guy is Batman. He's that big of a badass, and he's in Houston right now.
He's from Gotham City.
So anyway,
whenever he says up north, that's what he means.
We build these, and I'm still big on the facility thing, right? So I don't want people to think that I'm just throwing out everything I ever have said about this. I am really big on facility, but sometimes you see something that just seems really, really great, and it changes the way you think about things. And so for me, this practice seems really fantastic, and it seems so great that, I mean, if you told me there's a practice doing 1.2 with 40% hygiene and 3 full-time hygienists, that to me would be, I can't even imagine a practice that I'd rather buy than that one.
Well, the practice right now, I don't know if they're full-time because I'm seeing their hours. One girl's doing 40 hours, the other one's doing 32, the last one's only doing 18.
Tyler, so you were already being skeptical of this 3 full-time hygienist thing.
Quite. Yeah.
And the percentage is lower. I was wrong. The percentage is 29% versus 40%.
Ah, man.
Yeah, dude. I know. Bursting the bubble. I know.
It seems too good to be true.
It was too good to be true.
It probably is. When we talk about ops, because I do want to talk a little bit about why George got so excited, right? When we talk about ops, we're essentially talking about the potential for something to expand and to grow. But ultimately, one of the hardest things to build, as George has found out the hard way, is a patient base that's going to sustain that growth, because you can't put the cart before the horse, right? And so in a situation where it looked like this practice already kind of had the legs, George was even going so far as to controvert things that he'd said in the past about, moving an office right after you bought into it. So that should kind of illustrate what the real, gears that are turning are. It's not just, how many ops that we're looking at. It's ultimately like you want a patient base that's going to support the practice that you're looking to have. Am I putting that right, George? Don't let me put words in your mouth.
So here, let me kind of explain a little bit more. So hardest thing to change about a practice is the facility. That's why we really are harping on shying away from doing that. Second hardest thing to change about a practice is the number of patients they have. That takes the longest. It's the most expensive. Ask me how I know. And so the idea behind, right, picking which problem you want. Yeah, I think the idea of buying a practice with, so if they've had 3 hygienists, let's think about it this way. If they've had 3 hygienists in 4 operatories and they were full-time and the hygiene percent was 40 to 50%, like we had just thought, then think about how big their overdue recare pool is. They obviously can't fit people.
Yeah, they're booked out.
Yeah. So like no dentist is keeping 3 full-time hygienists and not having them slammed. So the overdue recare pool is huge. And this practice has likely had a large amount of referrals. It largely has a large patient base. So your baseline new patient flow has to be high. So I'm looking at a practice with a baseline new patient flow that's high, probably in a pretty bad location, but still has a large enough patient base. So this is a large following. This is a foothold in the community. And so when I hear 3 from an older doctor that's been there for 30 years, in my mind, I'm thinking 4.5 hygienists. That's the demand of the patient base. If we had the space.
If you did.
So if I had the space. And so if that practice existed, in my mind, I would. So right, what happens if you move it? You now have the high new patient flow that you can get with a startup. You can have the number of ops, the floor plan, everything you want with a startup. but you have the patient base, the cash flow, and everything from an acquisition. And this guy could quickly grow into that revenue to support that type of move. And so, yeah, for me, that seems like a killer thing where if I could build a 10-op practice with 4.5 hygienists in the course of a year, right? In a year, he could get there with taking on, let's call this practice $900,000, $800,000, an additional 500 to move it. But you probably don't have to pay. Usually it's cheaper when you're moving an existing practice than when you're doing a scratch start. So tops 500K in debt. And then you're looking at 1.4 for a practice with 10 ops in a great location with great new patient flow with 4.5 hygienists and an associate. Yeah, I would take that deal.
So it's like that. It's like that unicorn startup that you hear about every now and then, where within 1 year they're just like absolutely booming, but it's in a more predictable way. Like it's already primed, right? You have the numbers, so it's a quasi startup, quasi acquisition.
It's kind of taking the best of both worlds because then he could have the high sustainable new patient flow of a very visible location for the next 10, 20 years of benefit, but he has the cash flow, the patient base to grow into that right away. So I see a lot of benefit to that. And I hate that I'm talking about this because this opportunity will probably never exist for anybody, right? Like this will never happen. Like nobody is going to have that type of practice just sitting there, like doing 1.2 with 3 full-time hygienists, like 50% hygiene and this huge overdue recare pool. But I think the greater point is sometimes you can break if you understand the rules well enough, you can see where to break them and the benefits. And this whole thing is, we like to put boxes on things because that helps people understand them better.
Yeah, it's a framework.
But sometimes something comes along that just makes you question those rules. And that, to me, a practice doing 1.2, especially with this buyer, right? Like I almost feel like dentists walk around with hygiene percents on their head. And like it's like your score, like your patient efficiency score. Like this guy's like, I do everything, and he's walking around with like 22% hygiene on his head. And so realistically, that practice, if he checked for all those hygienists, which he probably wouldn't, that grows to 2+, and then you add hygiene. Like it's that grows so quickly. You're very easily doing over 2 in that new location. And so if I wanted to buy a practice in Houston doing over 2, I'm paying 2.
Right.
So I'm getting a $1.4 million investment for like a $2 million practice. So yeah, I'm taking that deal. Even though it sounds horrible and it includes a build out, everything I hate, it would obviously have a lot of benefits. So I wouldn't write that off so fast, but that is like Paul always calls things, Paul Goodman, he calls things like advanced, like level 5 ownership or like advanced ownership moves, like bringing in-house special. I was talking to Paul about bringing in-house pairings. Like that's an advanced ownership move. Like, are you sure you want to do that right now? And I was like, yeah. But that's like a very advanced transition move. That is not like walking into an office and not changing anything. That's like, yeah, I don't even know what, just like driving a race car when you're like learning stick, that's a whole lot of moving parts and a lot of things at once, and not this super straightforward thing, but it's something that piqued my interest because I think I quickly saw what was possible there.
Yeah. Well, I think to quote one of my
Did I talk myself off of the ledge that I put myself on?
No,
questioning everything I've ever said.
I'm actually going to quote one of my favorite Batman movies and say that you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I think that's kind of what you've done here.
Oh, geez, man.
I think
the fact that you could string Batman into this episode in a legitimate way is so impressive beyond belief that
Okay, Batman. Well, we have
let's wrap this up a little bit
enough.
though. I think we've gone on this tangent that's a little bit too long and far. And so I think we've hoped that we've identified sort of what you're looking for and helped you cut down on your efficiency of your process so that you can focus on getting stuff out there. And then 2 weeks later, start following up with all these dentists, giving them a call, say, hey, I sent you a mailer. I'm a dentist in the area looking to meet other dentists or whatever. Don't say you want to buy their practice right away, do over the answering machine, or else your front desk is not going to give it back to the dentist. And then you call them 2 or 3 times each, and you can start to identify the ones that you really want, especially if you're looking at their website, the size of their teams, and just get to know them and go from there. I wish we had spent more time on the actual, like when you meet them, what do you say? How does that conversation go? I feel like we've gone on long enough, and probably go ahead.
I want to hear from Batman as these calls are coming in and as you're having these conversations. I want to hear back. Like I want to hear what you're experiencing, and potentially we could have another interview getting into some of that, because that's going to be a moving target for you. But I think you're at a very auspicious time. You put in a lot of hard work. I'm proud of you, because I mean I think you've done a great job. Identifying the location you want to be in, and what you're looking for. And now that you have that, and you're at the precipice of having all these conversations coming towards you, I want an update. I don't want this to be the end of the road here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And I want to acknowledge you on understanding your vision well enough so that we didn't have to
work hard.
Yeah, no. I was almost feeling like, so we're this pre-owner underwater, we're calling it. I'm calling it.
Yeah. Okay.
Is a newish segment, brand new segment, and I think we're expecting people to not understand their visions, because that's something we've come across a lot in our buyer coaching. But you've been dead on. You're like, I know what I want. This is what I want. This is why. Seems checks out. And so we didn't have to do a whole lot of coaching with you right now. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is just helping you understand that deal finding is your biggest issue right now.
Absolutely.
And understanding that is the barrier you have to tackle, because you want to be able to be picky. And right, you are picky. You kind of like, it's like, I'm easygoing. I can live anywhere except for everywhere, And so the reality is that, you just have to have great deal finding, because that's what's going to let you find the thing you're looking for. You're looking for a rare thing in a small space.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you approach that first conversation? Because I've thought about calling. I've tried calling, and it's just hard to get to the dentist. The staff wants to know why you're calling, essentially. And what would you say to the staff to kind of not spook them? And
imagine if I called a seller and I said, "Hi, my name is George, and I'm looking to buy your practice." That seems a little abrasive.
Right.
And so you do not want to direct the request directly at the seller. And so there's two objectives here. There's one, getting in contact with the seller, and then there's this period of time, like when you're flirting with somebody, you don't want them to know that you like them, but you want to see if they like you, and kind of have that back and forth with them before you like straight up ask them out, or make a romantic move on somebody. It's the same type of thing in this situation, where when you actually talk to a seller, you want to sort of ride that in between line of, it could go either way. You could just be two friends, two dentists that are just talking to each other, versus you're talking to them about buying their practice. So I'll start with talking about the staff, and then we'll move into that conversation. So with the team, the biggest thing is getting to the dentist, right? At some point, they are and they're trained that way. They're not supposed to let stuff to their dentist that it's not needed. Most dentists make that known. And so if you send them a letter, and there's a chance that a small number of them will call you directly off the letter, that doesn't happen, then you just you give them a call. You say, "Hi, my name is Dr. Blank. I'm a local dentist in the area, and I just wanted to get to know Dr. Whoever."
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You want to get to know Dr. Whoever. Yeah. And realistically, I actually believe firmly in this. We're not being like super, right? We're being a little sneaky, but we're not purposefully, like, I genuinely feel the initial intention should just be to get to know them, get to meet other dentists, ask them questions about practice, about ownership. That is a secondary benefit to this whole exercise that you will get outside of finding a practice to buy. The more dentists you talk to, the different perspectives you'll get. Oh, that guy's interesting. I thought he did well. And try understanding, judge how well they've done, and judge why they may or may not have been successful. Like, I talked to this guy, and he was he was not doing well. And I ended up finding out later, one of my hygienists who I hired, before I hired her, she was going to work for this guy, and he had never had a hygienist. And he's like, "I'm turning a new leaf, and I'm going to hire a hygienist." And then he called her that night. He's like, I can't hire you. I'm sorry. Like, I changed my mind. I, just can't afford to lose that much money with a hygienist. That's what he told her. Wow. And so I found out this about after the fact, but the guy, when I met him, like, man, this guy's abrasive. Like, he is so scarce in his mindset, and he is just so, everybody who does well is unethical, that type of mindset. And, I was like, man, I really hate this guy. Like, I hate his mentality. And like, I mean, he seems like a nice person, but just as a dentist, we're very different in our mindsets. And then when I had he came up in passing with the hygienist, like, "Oh, she told me that story." I'm like, "Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it was very obvious from talking to him that he was not doing well. And I got to learn why. So even the ones that are not doing well, you learn a lot from. So I genuinely feel like that exercise of getting to know the dentist and getting to know their situation clinically, what are they like, and judging them and trying to learn from them and take things from them is just genuinely a good thing to do. But really so where was I was talking about getting to the dentist from the staff, saying you're a doctor that wants to get to know them. So I would send a letter, and then I would call once, say, hi, I'm Dr. Blank, I want to get to know seller doctor or whatever, and then wait a week, and if they don't get back to you, call back, say, hi, I'm Dr. Blank, I gave you a call, and I was hoping to get to know Dr. Blank. I never heard back, like just following up.
Sure.
2 calls a week apart and see what happens. That second one where you're like, front desk, hello, like I called you, I didn't hear back from the dentist, like what's going on here? Then they'll go back again. And that's probably your best bet. I think calling 3 times and doing that is a little bit annoying. But I think the one phone call, the follow-up, and the letter, and then a long period of space before next contact is probably what I would do. So I wouldn't bombard one office. I called my office 5 times, but I split it up. So I called them the first 2 times in succession. I waited about a year, and then I called them the second 2 times. And then I think maybe I called them once and then 2 times that I forgot. But I wouldn't contact them too many times in short succession without give them a year to forget about me.
Gotcha.
I was a second-year dental student when I decided on what practice I wanted. So it was a very different situation than yours. So realistically, you're a letter, 2 phone calls, and then you're moving on.
Right. And you're introducing yourself as Bruce Wayne right off the bat. You're just trying to get to know someone. And
yeah, you have to be Dr. Batman. You can't be anybody else. That call is definitely not going to be returned. So now let's talk about the conversation with the dentist. You're going to be wondering, are they selling their practice or not? Don't worry about that. Get to know them a little bit. How long have they been there? How large is their team? How many ops do they have? You can ask them those questions pretty innocently, right? Like, I'm looking to practice in the area and I just want to get to know and learn about the area and get to know fellow dentists. Want to get to know you. What type of procedures do you like to do? I like to do a lot of stuff. And it's just a friendly conversation. You're just getting to know the guy. Eventually, he's going to ask you about your plans. I just moved here and I'm looking to buy a practice in the area, and I'm just looking around, seeing if there's anything that's a good fit for me, any older dentists. I'm not looking to have a very long transition. You can lay out your transition strategy. I want something either just a walk away sale or 6 months tops. And then, the dentist moves on. Then I take over their practice. And then you stop. Now, if the seller is a seller, they will make themselves known, right? They'll say, oh, that sounds like something I might be interested in. Or, oh, I might have a friend that might be interested in that. Or, oh, that sounds cool. I'm probably a few years out. They'll usually address their situation in some type of way. And then, okay, yeah, that's cool. If you know anybody, have them contact me, and that would be really nice. And a lot of them are friends, and they'll think of you, and just say, here's my information. If they already have it, then just have them reach out, and I'm looking for something, and then describe what you're looking for. I want something larger with 6 to 8 operatories and 2 dentists typically, but I could grow into that over time. Doesn't have to have 2 dentists right away. Be very clear with everybody you talk to on the things that you want. And I would say that from brokers to bankers to reps to everybody you talk to. You're not like, it's not like a hand, like I'm looking for this thing, I'm not going to tell anybody. It's like, no, you want to tell everybody exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to be thrown into this batch of people who are just looking for practices. You want to have a very specific basket of, oh, this is someone that's looking for this particular practice that just came up. You know what I mean? Like you want to be more specific, I think. Yeah.
So before I keep going, do you have any questions about any of that stuff?
No, so far so good.
So I had this buyer in Phoenix, and you listen to the show frequently. I don't know if you've ever heard me say, in general, I don't, part of me wishes I had a larger practice when I started. So my practice when I bought it was collecting about 1.08. So it was just a hair over $1 million. And I wish I had bought something doing about 2. I guess I could do it. Tyler, do you feel like I need to explain that more, or do you feel like I've talked about that enough?
I believe you've probably talked about enough. I mean, we talked about, I think, your opportunity compared to Clay's before, and we kind of talked about, some of your growing pains that you've had. So I think that probably goes without saying.
So we had this buyer in Phoenix, my market, in our group coaching program, and we lay out the same advice for everybody. And he was talking to bankers and brokers alike, and he was telling them all, I'm looking for, the whole list, everything we're telling you to do. He was doing it. I want 8 ops, 2 dentists, doing 1.8 plus and the whole thing. And then what happened was he got a call from a broker, and it was like, hey, I have this practice that was exactly what you had just described. It's not even on the market yet. I want you to take a look at it because it's exactly what you're the perfect buyer for this practice. It is exactly what you had described. Right? So you planted a seed in the broker's mind, and then when they find the practice, you're the person they call.
Right.
And so he got access to that practice pre-market. So before it got listed, he got to sit down with the seller, look at the financials, and decide whether or not he wanted to buy it. So that deal ended up not going through for him. Buyer ended up another buyer. So that seller was very particular on the dentist that bought his practice. And so that seller ended up selecting a different dentist. But the next day or two, like it was like I followed up with him. I said, hey man, what's going on with that practice? He told me, didn't get it. Next day I said, but I got another one. I said, what? So that one was doing over 2 million. Yeah. Then the banker that he was working with on the deal, he very clearly laid out exactly what he's looking for, everybody he talks to. And this random banker that he happened to be talking to, not even the one he was going to finance a practice with, a random banker called him and said, hey, I got a practice that is pretty much exactly what you described. And it was another $2 million practice, 10 ops, better than the first one. And he ended up closing on that a couple months ago. So I'm looking at that situation really pissed off because it's in my market. Like I walked into practice thinking that those practices weren't out there and available in my market. And the reality is I just didn't know how to find them. And clearly communicating. So think about all those calls that you think are wasted. If you tell a seller like, hey, I'm looking for a practice with 8 ops, don't say 2 million. They're not going to care about that. But 8 ops, larger team, 2 dentists, then they're like, oh, my buddy Jim is retiring soon. And he'll go talk to his buddy Jim at like the study club or at golf or whatever. Like, hey, I met this guy and he's looking for this larger practice to buy it. And I'm not sure if you're interested or not, but I just wanted to pass that along. I could introduce the two of you. These things, the more people know exactly what you're looking for, the higher chance it is you get one of those phone calls if you don't directly contact the seller yourself. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, making yourself known within the network of people that could potentially produce an opportunity for you. I mean, I think that's actually, Matt talked a good bit about, putting his name out there and being very extroverted and putting out the message of what he was looking for. And I think Clay did something similar, and the opportunity that he got that George is so envious of did not come directly from his mailers. It actually,
oh really?
No, it did not. It did not. I mean, it ended up being a dentist that he knew prior, but it was through word of mouth. Like they had become aware that he was looking, and that's how
Clay was the talk of the town among the old dentists.
He was the talk of the town. That's how it happened. Yeah.
You know what's funny? Matt Porter was the broker on that deal.
Really?
I didn't want to say that, but yeah. Wow. So he's like over here giving advice for what that one buyer did that we're talking about the same guy. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. I haven't thought about being that specific with the bankers and the brokers. So I think I'll next couple of days I'll try to reach out to, talk to a number of bankers, a number of brokers. I'll try to reach out and kind of,
It's counterintuitive because you're like, I'm holding what I'm looking for close to my chest, and I'll just like evaluate that when I see it. But the reality is, when they talk to buyers, pretty much this is what they say: I make a lot of money as an associate, and I'm looking to buy a practice, any practice, some practice. Just give me a practice. And then the broker's like, okay, like nothing you said was helpful, but thanks. But if you go to them like, I'm looking for XYZQ, they're not going to show you the 3-op practice. So you are sacrificing the opportunity to find that 4-op practice doing 1.2 to 1.3. But the reality is that the one doesn't even do that anyway. So, you're just looking for things that fit your requirements, and they're not going to show you anything else, which is great because you're not going to waste your time with other stuff, and they're going to think of you when they see those larger practices.
Right. Right. So like you can still find those, quote unquote off market opportunities, but through that sort of on market stream, like you're talking to brokers and you're still talking to the people you would typically look for if you were looking for on market opportunities, but obviously they stay abreast of things that are just coming up of, out of thin air too. So just having yourself in their mind is really valuable too. Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily need to be, you being in the back cave, Googling practices and sending out a mailer. Right.
So now let's talk about evaluation requirements.
Yeah.
So how are we going to screen these practices? What are we going to look for?
Once we have the numbers?
Yeah.
Hunter Smith's model, stuff that I could add value with procedures. So, or at least, be able to do, but ideally stuff that I could add, fixed overhead, and hygiene percentage over, let's say, over 25.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one would be demographics, but that's, I feel like if the hygiene percentage is good, let's say you get 30 around there, maybe even more, then I don't really particularly care about demographics too much. You just spend more money in marketing, or it wouldn't be a deal breaker at least.
I would look at new patient flow.
Mm-hmm.
I would not necessarily not call it a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
I would put it in nothing, right? I think the whole 4-op practice example showed us that really at the end of the day, nothing is a deal breaker for the right opportunity,
Right.
and so it's all kind of an ingredient. But yeah, if your new patient flow sucks, but everything else checks out, then you might go for it. But if it's like new patient sucks, but you have 40% hygiene, then, it is what it is. But if you're like on the bare bottom of everything, like 6 ops, 25% hygiene, 1.2 million, 8 new patients a month, like there's a lot of things that are not, great. So then all of a sudden there's like a lot of C's on the report card, and then you're not liking the practice as much.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think in general, right, is the production reproducible? Seems like that's the hygiene. Like for you, a lot of stuff is reproducible. I would almost not even worry about that, barring a red flag. So anything, any hygiene percent over 20 wouldn't even cross my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could reproduce it. I would, because I think that for you, that's kind of a scar, is like, I don't know if I can reproduce this production. So I would almost want to eliminate it from your lens that you're looking at practices through. If it's over 20% hygiene, George promises you can reproduce it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's solid, because a lot of times we get kind of rigid about percentages, but of course that is relative to what you can reproduce, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in Batman's case, when you've been out for, I think you said you graduated in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
and you've had a lot of different experience and you've expanded your suite. I mean, you certainly have a little more wiggle room with regards to that.
Yeah. So 20% hygiene is all I would worry about for reproducibility, but like you're going to want a higher hygiene percentage because you're trying to build a group practice.
Right.
Naturally.
But,
yeah.
So inevitably the high hygiene percentage is important. I would focus on that as opposed to the minutia of, do they do implants? What type of endo do they do? How many surgical extractions to decode versus simple? Like I wouldn't worry about that stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's someone that has a more restricted clinical suite.
Yeah.
That's something they need to be.
I'm raising my hand. Yes, I have the restricted clinical suite.
Yeah,
I would care about that stuff. Like
you needed to go through that, production by procedure code report very carefully.
Yes, to make sure that there was not a whole lot going on past crowns and fillings. Yes.
Yeah.
So I would do that, and then correct number of operatories, transition strategy, and then you just kind of, if it checks off, but I think you're going to have a hard time finding one with at least 2 hygienists and 7 ops.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be hardest to find.
Yeah.
My guess is once you find that, so long as the fixed costs are reasonable, it's probably a go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the area you want with a seller that seems like a reasonable human being.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's probably a go. And do you have anything, Batman, that you wanted to ask about or add before we wrap up?
To kind of circle back around, if there's no online presence, most likely it's a one-man show. He's just kind of trucking along. He's not really doing too much. So really look at the website, and if there's no online presence, just kind of not to worry about potentially missing, a diamond in the rough. Just, wait, save the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're missing the needle in the haystack, so
yeah.
Right. We try to make this more efficient. You got 1,200 dentists on that list, and you don't want to mail to all of them. So we have to have a way of weeding these down, and we got to call them all twice. I'd much rather put that effort into something that is reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I personally don't feel like somebody has a 7-op practice with 2 dentists or 2 associate, or, an associate or 2 hygienists at least, without a website. Like,
makes sense.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, that's borderline insane, So unless you're like in, some random place in like Georgia where Tyler is. It wouldn't be, but you're in Houston. Like, people here have to be up with the times. Their patients are on Google and Yelp and stuff. I mean, any dentist savvy enough to grow a practice of that size and have something worth over $1 million is likely going to have a website.
Right.
Yes.
Fair enough.
That's fair.
I'll roll the dice on that one.
It just saved me a couple hours a day, so fair enough.
Right? Like,
Fair enough.
that's what I'm wondering. Like 4 or 5 hours a day, man. You got to get moving. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
That's true. Yeah. Well, Batman, I hope we have addressed enough of your concerns, and I hope that we address some of the concerns of our audience. If anybody has any questions about our episode today, or has further questions of some of the concepts that we covered, I know we kind of broke some new ground here. Feel free to private message George on Facebook or send us an email at sptheinterns at gmail.com. And if you know of any opportunities where there are 3 full-time hygienists and only 4 ops, we'd be interested to hear about it, because we don't think that exists. We think it's a unicorn. But other than that, Batman, I just want to thank you personally. Thank you so much for being on and sharing with us your experiences and the process as you're going along. And it means a lot to me that you be, willing to be transparent about that and, come out of the cave and tell us what's going on. So I'm really excited for you. I want to see where this goes. I want to hear some follow-up on what kind of things come your way.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks a lot. Definitely, cleared up a couple things, because I was looking at some practices that were a little bit smaller. I'm kind of just going to, pass those up essentially and just speed up the process a little bit. So thanks a lot. This was very helpful, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Batman.
Thank you.
All right.